Hey everyone, it's your girl Sarah right here on the chat trap, and I have a lot of things to talk to you about today. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm so excited to share all these new things that I have to share today. So if you're just tuning in, you're with me, Sarah, and you're right here on Relax Radio. But I'm doing chat trap today. A bit of change is always good, especially during these tough times because we're all struggling. We're all trying to change up everything every day. So it's always good to change up things while we're at it. So I'm here to talk to you about whether the lockdown is finally getting to us because it looks like it is. You know what I mean? Because we've been stuck in lockdown for exactly about 451 days, and that means that it's now start to it's getting to us, because we've been stuck at home, we haven't had much things to do, and we're finally it's almost like we finally come to this sense of realization. We're now beginning to process it and understand that, oh my gosh, look, we're finally actually going through lockdown. This is finally happening. So that's why I'm here to talk about it today, because I believe that the lockdown is beginning to take a toll on people. And when I mean people, I'm talking about people who are young to people who are old, everyone. I'm talking about everyone in the United Kingdom, right? And that's why we're gonna get into this. So the lockdown actually obviously came across, or it happened simply because of the pandemic, right? And we've been in the lockdown for 451 days, and that means that we've been in lockdown for almost a year and a half. So the thing is, while we are struggling to come to terms with the lockdown, we're struggling to be okay with the lockdown, we need to understand that it is the government that's actually trying to protect us. So because the government is trying to protect us, and they're trying to maintain our health, they're trying to prioritize our health, and they're trying to make sure that we are making sure we prioritize our health as well. It's really hard because we're also struggling with trying to be okay. Now that's the irony of it. Even though the government is trying to protect us and make us feel safe and make sure our health is actually prioritized, we're not necessarily feeling like our health is prioritized, simply because of the fact that we have to spend so much of time at home. We're isolated, we're not in close contact with other humans, and as humans who are supposed to be social beings, and that was what Aristotle said. So he said that we should be that humans are actually social beings. So as a social being, and as someone who is a social butterfly, it's really hard because I'm beginning to finally understand the isolation, and understand how worrisome and how uncomfortable it is to actually stay alone. And I know I'm not the only one facing that. I know there's a lot of people out there who's actually going through that right now. So obviously, everyone is struggling with that, and that's why I said it's taking a toll, because we're finally beginning to understand just how isolated we are. We've been spending days and months in lockdown, so it's finally getting to us, because now we're beginning to understand, look, maybe the pandemic has no end. It's beginning to feel like it, right? Because when the first lockdown happened, we were okay with it, we thought we could get through it, because ultimately in our heads we knew that this was going to end, somehow these travel restrictions were going to be they were going to be reduced, that these travel restrictions, or even restrictions in general, were going to be lifted. And that meant that a lot of us knew that eventually it would come to an end, and eventually we'd all be okay, and we'd be able to go out. But that's not what we're feeling right now. That's not what a lot of us are feeling right now, and that's why it's so hard to come to terms with the fact that we've been in lockdown for so long, and that it is finally getting to us. Okay, but I want to talk about a group of people who are really, really affected by the lockdown right now, and that is actually children and teenagers. And I'm specifically talking about this age group, but I'll also be talking about other ages as well. Obviously, I'm talking about older people, people who are living in care homes. I'll be talking about everyone, but I really want to focus on young people right now. And this is because young people, or people who are, teenagers, children, were actually supposed to be going out, or rather they're actually supposed to be going out and having fun, right? Because that's what childhood is about. It's about going out, it's about exploring, it's about having fun, and it's about, always being curious about these things, especially your environment, and so many other things. But the thing is, we can't currently, or rather our kids or our siblings can't currently go out and have fun. And and usually that was what I did when I was that age. I was always out, and I was always wounded because I was so naughty, and I would always be playing and having fun. But the reality of it right now is that a lot of people can't actually do that, or rather a lot of children can't do that. And that means that now they're going to be spending increased hours on social media. And you know what that means? Spending a lot of time on social media never helped anybody. It definitely didn't help me when I was bored, and I know it's not going to help these younger kids as well, especially because younger minds are more susceptible to things that are portrayed on social media. Younger minds are more vulnerable, and you can influence younger minds so much more than you can actually influence older minds. So obviously, that's what I am talking about. So yesterday I was actually talking to my sister, obviously, because we live in the same house. But she was, having online classes when I went home, and they have online classes at like the most odd times ever. And sometimes they have extra classes, to stay in check, or to make sure they're keeping up with the syllabi and all of that. So obviously, when I went home and I was talking to my sister yesterday, I was, she didn't look too happy to be online, and she was telling me how she felt like she had no purpose in life, because she was constantly staring at this computer screen. She was constantly just stuck at home, and she was trying to figure out, why am I doing this? Why am I actually going to online classes? It's not helping me. And she looked like so fed up of existing. She looked like she was done with online classes. And the first thing that she wanted to do, if someone ever mentioned the word online classes again, was to dash the computer. And believe me, I've been there. I can relate to that. It's very tiresome, it's very draining, especially when you're staring at your computer screen for so long. Obviously, you're thinking about, hey, w- do I actually want to keep doing this? It's not making me feel good. I feel tired, I feel drained, my eyes hurt, and my hands hurt because I'm constantly on the computer. So that's what she was telling me as well. And because of that, because they're spending longer hours on social media, they're spending longer hours on their laptops, on their, iPads, whatever it is actually taking a toll on these children. Because people are actually more isolated than ever before, and most of us are virtually connecting with our friends and our family. And because we're isolated, we're actually spending so much more time on our phones and on social media. And obviously, like I was saying this before, children, or rather teenagers, feel this much more intensely, because at their age it's all about, going to school, making new friends, doing all these naughty things that you did when you were at school. Yeah, those were the memories. It's so crazy how much life has changed within these past 2 years, and how much we're all struggling to come to terms with how much this world has changed. Because it's been definitely it's been very thought provoking. You've had to basically stop everything. You've had to freeze time and take a look at your life, and think, oh, how did things change so fast? And it's really hard to sort of come to terms with the fact that things have changed so fast. So obviously, imagine if we as adults are struggling to come to terms with it. Imagine how much children are suffering, because they're young, they're confused, their minds are susceptible, like I said earlier. So imagine how much more they're struggling with coming to terms with this lockdown, right? And because we're finally in the stage, and because vaccination drives and everything's happening, we tend to think that maybe things are getting back to normal. Maybe we will be able to get back to normal, to go out, to have fun. But obviously, with our prime minister extending lockdowns by almost a month, and us having to just go back on our hopes, all those hopes we had, they were all dashed on the ground just like that. And you've had to sort of be okay and adjust to it, and understand the fact that you're going to be more isolated. You just have to be okay with it. You have to come to terms with it. But the thing is, because we're spending so much of time in isolation, because we're spending so much of time alone, without contact with other people, our family, not necessarily our family, but our relatives, our co-workers, our friends, because we're not in contact with them. It's actually getting really hard for us, because even I am beginning to feel frustrated. And what I mean when I say I'm beginning to feel frustrated is just my day is so routinal. I have to wake up every day in the morning. I have to wake up every day and nothing changes. I don't go out. I don't go out as much as I used to, and things are definitely so much more different than it was back then. And it's so hard to adjust to these things and come to terms with the fact that our society has actually changed a lot. Because I wake up, I'm on my phone, I have my breakfast, my cup of coffee, I do my work, and then again, it's just after my work, I'm tired, so I sleep, then I wake up again. It's very routinal. Nothing changes. It's the same thing over and over again. And it's so monotonous that you're actually just fed up now. And because it's so routinal, because it's so monotonous, the first thing that's on your mind is obviously, I want this to stop. I want to get out of it. But obviously, with the lockdown being extended, you can't really get out of it, and you're struggling with that. So obviously, that is the exact same thing children are going through, but probably more intensely, because they're very confused. They're trying to adjust to this. They're trying to come to terms with the fact that the world has changed, that they can't go out, that they're sort of that caged inside their homes. And children, young people, they're very free souls. They love to go out. And I know I'm young too, but we all love to go out. We all love to have fun, and even if you don't like going out, you do want to go out once in a while, because look, it gets boring staring at the four walls of your house every day. It's hard, and it's really, really depressing sometimes. If I were to use the word, it can actually get depressing sometimes. But stay tuned, because I have a lot to talk about on is the lockdown finally getting to us, and how it's actually affecting people of all ages, and people of all ages and color, whatever race, whatever age you are, it is affecting all of us. So I'll be back to talk about it, but right now let's head into a break.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're writing? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly one, because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's very important, right? Because
Very
you want
important,
cars, yeah.
very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Girls, ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Well, good morning. If you're just joining in, you're hanging with me, Sarah, and we're talking about how the lockdown is finally taking a toll on everyone who is out there. Now, if you have any questions, if you have any messages or anything that you want to get across to me, any opinions, any thoughts that you want to share, you can do that by just texting me on 078 and we can have a conversation about it, or we can even get into these opinions, these thoughts that you're having about spending so much time in lockdown as well. Okay, so I'm excited to be here. And earlier we were talking about how the lockdown is finally taking a toll on everyone, how everyone is feeling so isolated and so lonely, and how it's finally affecting our mental health. And I'm not saying finally. Most of us, it has started affecting the mental health of most of us some time back, but some of us can feel it even more intensely right now. So I was talking about children because there is something important when it comes to children. And what I'm talking about is, according to new statistics that were actually released by the NHS, the hospital admissions of young children actually hit a record high during the pandemic. And this is obviously because of the body image issues that children were having, simply because they were spending so much of time on social media, and because they were finally, it was finally getting into them. So obviously, this was what was happening, and that's why there was this huge increase in admissions. There was this huge increase in children getting a lot of these disorders and having to deal with that. And what I mean when I say that is, there was a lot of admissions, and I will just get into it in a bit. But there were a lot of cross-party MPs and even charities that said that the lockdown and the closure of schools were finally taking its toll on children. And from the 2,682 admissions in the NHS, most of them, or rather all of them, were children. And the NHS also said that they were treating so much more children and young people than they used to almost a year back. So now that's making you wonder, or that's finally making sense to you, because now you realize that children are actually also a huge part of the group, or rather a hugely vulnerable group that is currently going through stuff because of the pandemic. And because of that, it's very important that we focus on our children. We make sure that they're okay, and we constantly ask them if they're okay, because something that's currently happening right now is simply the fact that a lot of the children that we live with, or even the children we know, or even the children around UK, are actually going through a lot of the things that I mentioned right now. So obviously, it's very important to ask them if they're okay. It's very important to check on them and see if they're okay, because a lot of these children who were admitted to hospital were actually going through severe eating disorders, simply because of the body image issues that were, that they're dealing with, simply because of all the time they spent on social media. So something that is important to note, or something that needs to be taken into consideration, is that social media companies were actually urged to introduce clear labeling policies that could help children and other people who are vulnerable to these kind of things identify that it wasn't actually real. Now, this problem of this body image crisis has actually existed for a really long time, and this is not the first time we're hearing about it, and this is not the first time it's happening either. But what needs to be understood is that in the pandemic, these things have increased. and what I mean when I say it's increased is that it has exacerbated so much more than it used to be back before the pandemic ever happened, pre-COVID, because children didn't spend as much time as they did on social media as they're doing right now, and because they were constantly out, they were constantly in school, they didn't actually spend a lot of time on social media because obviously they had work. But the difference now is that they're at home a lot, and they're constantly on their phones. They're always checking their social media, or even if it's schoolwork, they're constantly on digital devices. So because of that, obviously, a lot of these children are being affected because of it. And a lot of these children are actually going through huge body image issues, and that's why we need to make sure that the children we live with, the children we know, are okay. Because honestly, it's not hard to text someone, and when I mean someone I know, I mean children. But it's not hard to text someone who is currently struggling with body image issues. It's not hard to text them and ask them how they are, check on them once in a while, just to make sure they're okay. And I know sometimes it's hard because you yourself is struggling with the pandemic, you yourself is struggling to come to terms with everything that's happening. But if you text them, and if you check on them, then that's okay. Because you know that they're going to be able to confide in someone. They're going to be able to tell someone, look, I'm not necessarily okay, I'm not actually okay right now, I'm going through something, but I really appreciate the fact that you texted and you asked. Okay, so that's one way in which we can actually help people who are struggling with this, and who are struggling with the whole body image crisis, and who are struggling to make sure that they are okay. So obviously, one thing that has to be mentioned is that a lot of these admissions were actually children who were under the age of 17, and that just goes to show how much of influence social media has on children, how much influence these apps have on children, and how susceptible these their minds are. Because you begin to understand that there is a lot of damage that is done when they're spending so much time on social media. And obviously, from those 2,682 admissions, 2,458 of them were actually female admissions. And it's more clear than ever before that a lot of us are struggling with our mental health, a lot of us are struggling with our physical health, and a lot of us are trying to, are struggling to stay alive during this pandemic. So it's important to keep that in mind. And also, when we're talking about body disorders, or even eating disorders, or this body dysmorphia that is there within a lot of people, what needs to be understood is that when it comes to things like this, it's about having control of your body. A lot of the, or rather, the reason most people actually try to control what they eat, control what they're eating, control their diet, is actually because they want to have control over their bodies. And what I mean when I say this is, obviously, a lot of these eating disorders is about having control over your body. So what happens is, when you're spending a lot of time on social media, when you're constantly seeing these perfect bodies, or when you're constantly seeing what kind of body you should have, then you begin to think, am I actually having a good body? Am I actually having what society deems as perfect? And when you think, or when you begin to realize that you don't have a body that is deemed perfect by society, that's when they want to start taking control of their bodies. They want to go on these diets. And the thing is, if you want to change how you look, and if you want to change how you are, the thing is, you need to consult a doctor, you need to get medical help, you need to get someone who knows how to change your physique and whatnot help. And just because you get into this diet, or just because you suddenly stop eating, it doesn't necessarily help. And that's why there is a lot of these body image issues within these young children, because they tend to think that they can actually change themselves, which is not true. And another thing that also needs to be mentioned is that this probably is caused by the fact that some children actually don't feel comfortable in themselves. And as adults, it's actually our responsibility to constantly tell them, or reassure them, that they're okay, that they look completely fine, and that there's nothing wrong with them. Because as children, as a child, something I've always wanted, and something my parents have always given me, is they've given me compliments, they've appreciated me, they've told me, you're good at this, you're good at that, you'll be so good when you grow up. And that's the kind of thing that a lot of children need to hear. You need to motivate them and make sure they're okay, that they're doing their best, that at least you see they're doing their best, and that you understand that they're putting in everything they can. So it's always very important to make sure your children know that you care for them, you appreciate everything they're doing, and that you constantly want to motivate them as well. Okay, that's important when you're trying to battle this whole issue, and when you're trying to get children to actually be comfortable in themselves. So something else that I also wanted to mention is that MP Luke Evans has actually put forward this private members bill that requires companies to clearly label the images that have been digitally altered. Now that's very important, and that needs to be taken simply because of the fact that these companies, or even social media websites, or rather social media, is in fact actually responsible for a lot of these body image issues that are currently being spread on the social media, right? So if they actually take an effort, or if they actually try to change everything and make sure that people are aware that the images they're seeing are digitally altered or edited, then they know that what they're seeing is not real, right? When you're constantly seeing something that society perceives as normal, when you're constantly seeing something that society thinks is the perfect one, it's very important for you to actually make sure that you know how to deal with it. So that is what that is. But stay tuned, because I'll be back again here to talk to you about how the lockdown is finally getting to us. But it's time for me to head into a small break right now.
Climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
You're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that will improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when you, if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there. You're quite right.
I mean, I've been doing this for quite some time. I mean, hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much has changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. if that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection. Essentially, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset, you know. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young, well, still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he'd say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter. Yeah.
You know, he'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it," and that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. For me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you know, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. You know, when it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. You know how much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, you know, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. You know, for the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Hey guys, it's Sarah right here on Relax Radio, and I am back again to talk to you about how the lockdown is finally taking a toll on us, especially children. And I'm super excited to be here and tell you about it. Now, if you were just joining in, super excited to be here. A very good morning. And earlier we were talking about how long hours on social media is actually fueling a body crisis image for all the children in UK. So obviously, there's a lot of issues with that, and I was just explaining how we as adults, we also have a part in making sure our children are okay, how we need to make sure, and they're okay. We need to, you know, look after them, make sure that they're doing what is best for them, and also constantly motivating and appreciating them, because as a child, that's what we've all wanted to hear. And obviously that's what our parents have done as well. They've obviously, you know, helped a lot of us by motivating us and appreciating us when we were children. So obviously, this is a huge issue, and what I was telling earlier is that social media actually plays a huge part in fueling this body crisis image, or body image crisis, right? um, and what I mean by that is, a lot of the times when these digitally altered pictures are posted on social media, most of us aren't aware it's digitally altered, and obviously that's because it's edited so well, right? That's the whole point of the apps like Photoshop or even other editing apps. It's to make it look so good that you wouldn't think it's edited in the first place. But the thing is, a lot of it is actually edited, and a lot of us aren't sure about it. And because of that, we're constantly at this, we're constantly so confused, and we don't know what is real and what is not. And that's why there's always this mantra that says, don't believe everything you see on social media. It's not what you see on social media isn't always the right thing. So it's very, very important that you always make sure your children also understand this, that people who are young understand this. And also, if you yourself is having one of these eating disorders, body image issues, it's very, very important that you tell yourself as well that everything that you see on social media isn't true. And that's why the MP Luke Evans actually wanted to put forward this private members bill that actually asked these companies to make sure that when these sort of images were being posted online, that there was a label that said it was digitally altered. And if you are not too, if you're not too sure, or if you aren't really if you don't really understand how that happens, it's quite simple. I'll give you a really understandable understandable example. It's basically, sometimes when you go on Instagram, when people say wrong things, it says fact checkers prove this is false, right? And that's the exact sort of thing that MP Luke Evans is asking these companies to put forward. So when people see these images, they know that it's not real and that it has been digitally altered. And it's very important for these companies to take these steps and make sure that they are that they're labeling these images, because we need to make sure that our children can differentiate between what is realistic and what is very unrealistic. And given the fact that we're in lockdown and there has been the absence of the absence of school, and that people aren't going to school, it means that a lot of young people's mental health, or even well-being, emotional well-being and physical well-being, has gone unchecked. Because obviously when you go to school, you have counselors, you have nurses that do this, quite, they check up on you regularly, or when you go and talk to your counselor, they will help you. So when you are in school, your counselor, or all these people who are supposed to help you, have an idea of what you're going through, because you're constantly going and talking to them. But obviously with lockdown and people not being able to go to school, they haven't necessarily been able to talk to their counselors. So their counselors itself are not too sure about the well-being of children and how they're actually functioning, and if they're doing okay or not. So it's very, very important that we start taking this issue more seriously, and we start looking at our children and checking up on them more often and seeing if they're okay. And the other thing is, we tend to be really good at hiding things when things aren't going that great. Especially if you're going through something tough, chances are you probably won't tell anyone. Now, if you're someone like me, I would never tell anyone I'm going through a problem. I'd go through it all by myself. I'll go through it all alone, not tell anyone. And when I'm okay, I would tell someone. But there are people who go through problems, who end up they go through it, they find a solution to that problem, but even then they still don't open up about their problems. So it's very important to actually check on them, and it's very important to make sure that they're talking about their problems, and they're making sure that their voices are heard, that they're able to get help for their body image issues as well, because that is something that a lot of people need help with. And another thing that needs to be talked about is how much we stigmatize these bodies, and I will be getting into that, because I want to focus a little bit on the body positivity movement, because I thought it would actually help you to understand this body image issue better, and how it would actually help you to understand how to deal with someone who was having huge, or rather who was going through body image issues, right? So let's talk about the body positivity movement. Now, you've heard about it, and we've all seen it, and a lot, and come on, most of us think it's unhealthy, or some of us don't support it because we think that's not the best way to go about it. But obviously, there's a lot of opinions on the body positivity movement, but I'm not here to give opinions. I am just here to tell you what it is, what it has done, and how it has actually, it has, it has both pros and cons, how it has helped and also put these people at a disadvantage, right? So let's get right into it. If you're just tuning in, you're with me, Sarah, on the chat trap, and we're talking about how the lockdown has finally taken a toll on all of us. But right now, I'm focusing on children, especially young children with susceptible minds, who are very, very, who can easily be victimized by what they see on social media, and how we can actually help to change that. So let's get into the body positivity movement now. It's actually a social movement that focused on empowering individuals to accept themselves and to feel comfortable in themselves, no matter what kind of body they had, and no matter what weight or size they were. And it was all about challenging the ways, and challenging the beauty standards and the norms of the beauty industry. Okay, and if you know what I mean, you know how the beauty industry has obviously talked about the perfect body being a size 8. If you can't fit into a size at black mini dress, well, that means you have the perfect body. But the thing is, that's not true, and that's very unrealistic, because not a lot of people have size 8 bodies. We're human, we're diverse, we have different types of bodies, and you can't simply choose one body type and call it perfect. It doesn't exist like that. And in addition to actually women going through this as well, there are also men that have a lot of body positivity issues, or they don't feel comfortable in themselves. Now I'll be talking about that as well, because bodies and how comfortable you feel in your body is something that is relevant to everyone. It's not a single gender issue, but rather it's relevant to everyone, because you have to feel comfortable in yourself. And that is also something that's very important to me, because I've always helped out a lot of people who are going through things like that. And it's always good to make yourself aware of it, even if you're not aware. And it's always good to make sure you know what to do and you know how to help these people, right? So obviously we were talking about the body positivity movement, and we were just talking about how it's actually helping a lot of people, or rather it helps a lot of people come to terms with their bodies. So because it challenges these normal beauty standards, it challenges these norms of how beauty should be, and it helps in fighting you know negative body images. It's been actually a really, really important movement within society, and within all over the globe, actually, from UK to the US to even countries like Asian countries. There is a lot of people talking about body positivity and talking about how you need to focus on your bodies and love your bodies. Okay, so obviously I want to get into how it actually started and how it originated, because the narrative right now for body positivity movements have actually changed a lot. So obviously it started out as accepting fat bodies and destigmatizing fat bodies, because there was a lot of discrimination and marginalization that was faced by fat bodies. And it's actually a movement that is rooted in social justice, and it birthed organizations like this organization called the National Association, the National Association to accept fat bodies, right? And this is simply because fat people were actually, or rather plus size people were actually marginalized, and they had to face a lot of discrimination when they were, when they wanted basic things like healthcare and other rights that normal, that we can just go and get. A lot of these plus size people um had a lot of issues facing all of those things. So obviously that's why it started, that's why the body positivity movement came about, and that's why it is playing such a huge role. That is why it's playing such a huge role in helping a lot of people battle and come to terms with these negative body images and understand that they themselves don't really have anything wrong with them. So the organization that it birthed was actually something called the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. And what they did was they fought, and they still continue to fight, for fat phobia and systemic fat oppression. And obviously why I'm telling you all of this is because I myself have had so many friends, and I still have friends who have faced these problems, who have had issues getting healthcare simply because, they were told that they're probably having all of these problems simply because they're fat. But the thing is, sometimes you can have a lot of other issues, right? It all the health issues that you have in your body isn't necessarily because you're fat. It doesn't always mean that you're sick because you're fat. There are a lot of other issues that can happen, and this is why this came about. So obviously, the body positivity movement was actually first created by and for people who were in marginalized bodies. And I'm talking about people who are plus size, people of color, and other, even disabled people, because even disabled people had a hard time accepting their bodies. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? If you are on social media and you're constantly just seeing these bodies where people are beautiful, they're perfect, they're so curvaceous, they're slim, they're flawless, they have absolutely nothing wrong with their bodies, you yourself is going to start questioning, is there something wrong with me? And this is the same narrative that exists around things like even skincare, right? Because we're seeing, every time you see these makeup advertisements or cosmetic advertisements, these people have nothing wrong with their skin. And the thing that's in your head is, how can someone have such smooth, flawless skin? Like, is that possible? Because you actually start to think, is there something wrong with me? But the thing is, it's natural to have acne, it's normal to have stretch marks, those things are normal, that's just how our bodies are, right? But that's why they started, creating this movement, because they wanted to help people who were actually going through a lot of this. So obviously, this movement started picking up attention because people were about body positivity. And what happened is influencers, or rather plus size influencers, started using the body positivity movement to actually promote themselves. Now that's where it went wrong, right? When people, or when influencers start using it for themselves to make sure they're promoting themselves and they're advertising themselves, that's when everything started going wrong. Because it wasn't only plus size influencers that were using it, it was also smaller size content creators. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's body positivity, right? It's about accepting all bodies and all shapes and sizes. But what it did is, when these influencers started using it, a lot of these organizations that were, or rather a lot of these companies that were about marketing, advertising their products, what they did was they started using these plus sized influencers in their marketing campaigns. And that's when things started going really bad, because the kind of people they would use in these marketing campaigns were actually a certain type of plus size figure. So the plus size figure was always fair skinned. It was a very curvaceous person who had a really nice body, and at most it was just a US size 12, which is not necessarily what the body positivity movement was about. It wasn't about accepting bodies, or asking for justice for bodies that were already accepted by society. And that's when things started going wrong, and a lot of and the body positivity movement started getting a lot of negative remarks and thoughts because of what was happening. So obviously, when they started marketing these plus sized influencers, they started doing that simply because they wanted to be able to market their products. But they used it, or rather they used the guise of body positivity, but it was just a way to market their products. And that's how it works, right? The moment something is trending, the moment it's a hashtag, people will start using it for their advantage. People will start using it to promote their products. That's just how the world works. But the thing is, a lot of these companies were actually responsible for the negative interpretations that are currently there of the body positivity movement. And that is a reason why why this movement is largely misunderstood, is actually because of this body positivity movement, or rather because of these corporations, right? And that is how body image issues happen. But stay tuned, because I'm about to head into a little break, and we'll be right back to talk about body positivity and the lockdown taking a toll on all kinds of people, because that is something we need to talk about as well. But stay tuned, because we will be right back.
The Chat Trap.
You're right on the chat trap with me, Sarah, and I was talking earlier about body positivity and the body positivity movement, especially because we're all stuck in lockdown, and that is taking a huge toll on children, and a lot of these children seem to be struggling with body positivity issues. So obviously that was what I was talking about, and that is what we will get into right now as well. So earlier talking about the body positivity movement and how there has been a lot of, while it has also caused a lot of good things, it has also had a negative image right now. And that's obviously because of the campaigns, or it's because of the companies that were using these body positivity or rather movements to promote their own propaganda, to promote their own agendas. And it actually focused or took the focus away from something that was really important, right? um, but let's move on to talking about some other body types as well. So obviously when it comes to the body positivity movement, we're not just talking about fat bodies. We're not talking about plus size bodies only. We're also talking about people who are called skinny, or people who are considered small, and there is a lot of skinny shaming that currently happens as well. So we're talking about those things as well, right? And one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest causes of skinny shaming, or even promoting these really slim figures, is actually the modeling industry, right? Because a lot of these models are what you would normally consider anorexic. And what I mean by this is because a lot of these models don't really have a proper diet. Their diet would consist of a lot of water and just a few fruits for a day, which isn't necessarily healthy. And these diets were mostly based on starving. So obviously that was a huge issue that was there when you're talking about body positivity, and how it has fueled these children to actually have negative perceptions about their bodies, and how we have this perfect body image which isn't necessarily helping anyone in society. And that's what the body positivity movement was about. It was about giving voice to marginalized bodies, marginalized people who had different types of bodies, and who constantly felt like they were being discriminated by governments, or even by healthcare systems and whatnot. And that's what that was about. But obviously things have changed so much right now. Things are so much more different, and that's why we are going to be moving on to how the lockdown has actually affected other people. And when we're talking about how it has affected other people, we need to keep in mind that obviously teenagers and children aren't the only ones who are affected by the lockdown, right? A lot of other people are affected by the lockdown, and I'm talking about people who are older, people who are middle-aged, people who are adults, and people who are struggling to come to terms with what is currently happening. So according to recent research that was done, there was an 86% increase in the number of people who are seeking help this year in comparison to last year. And obviously that means that because of the isolation we've been feeling at home, this means that because of how we've been isolated, how we haven't been able to meet our friends and our family, that all our mental health issues are actually coming back up. If not, they're actually exacerbating, right? Because obviously the stress that we're currently feeling, and the stress that we're currently going through will get intense with time, because the longer we are with ourselves, or the harder it is to actually deal with how monotonous and how negative our life looks right now. So obviously a lot of when talking about people who are actually, or rather adults who are actually affected by this, we also need to talk about families of those who have a history of substance abuse, right? Because those families are under a lot of pressure, and they're under a lot of danger right now as well, because the whole issue exists that if some of them are recovering, there's also a high possibility that they could relapse, that there's a high possibility that they could actually get back into that abusive state, or rather where they abuse substances and whatnot. So it's very important to actually make sure that they are safe as well, right? And obviously the increasing number of people asking for help just goes to show that there is something we need to change about this lockdown. Like, understanding that we need to have the lockdown to keep ourselves safe, we also need to find ways in which we can help all the people that are currently going through all of this to actually stay sane, and to focus on other things instead of just focusing on the lockdown. Another thing that was actually seen was that the lockdown is actually heightening the trauma and mental health disorders of people, because obviously, like I said, when you're constantly stuck with yourself, things tend to get hard, right? Because there's only so much that you can actually stop yourself from thinking something. There's only so many times you can do it until it finally gets to you and you have no choice but to give in. And psychologists have also said that a lot of people are experiencing something that they call the pandemic burnout, which means that because we're all by ourselves, because we're constantly staring at computer screens, it means that we're constantly just focusing on we're constantly trying to focus. It means that we're actually we have lower levels of concentration, that we have sleep and memory issues, and we can't and we also feel very sluggish and sleepy, and like we have no energy at all to do what we're doing, which makes a lot of sense because obviously you can only sit in your chair for so long. You know what I mean? It's so hard to sit, especially if you're studying, especially if you're in school, when you have classes right after one another and you have to just stare at your screen and sit in your chair for like 3-4 hours at a stretch. That is so hard. And obviously it's very hard to stay focused when you have to sit in one place and you have to just stare at a screen and wait. And I myself actually face this. It's very hard to focus. It's really hard to concentrate, and it's very hard to even think and answer questions sometimes, because it feels like time is just passing and you're stuck and frozen in this moment and you can't do anything about it. And that's what it feels like. And that's why psychologists are reporting that this pandemic burnout is actually happening at a higher rate, and it's actually not looking that great for a lot of people who have a lot of these issues. Now, another thing is that people are finding it really hard to stay positive, because like I said earlier, how we rewarded ourselves during the first lockdown, or how we tried to get through the first lockdown, was because we knew that eventually these restrictions would be lifted. We knew that eventually we would be able to go out. So in our heads, it actually felt like we were going to probably be able to get back to normal in a few more months or even a few more weeks. But that is not what it's currently looking right now, because if we've been stuck in lockdown for 451 days, that's actually making us question as to whether we can continue to stay positive for the rest of this, because it doesn't seem, because there's a lot of uncertainty about when lockdown is actually going to end. So you're constantly questioning yourself, you're constantly trying to figure out if things are going to work the way they're supposed to, if you're ever going to be able to step out of your house. And there's so many other questions about the pandemic as well. Other questions like whether we are able to completely get rid of the pandemic, or if we're able to finally or if this is something that's seasonal. What if pandemic just happens, like the occasional cough or the occasional flu, those things you constantly have every year. You have the occasional cough and you have the occasional flu and the cold, those things, right? So whether this will be seasonal. Now, if it is going to be seasonal, then that is something that we're going to be uncertain about again as well, right? Because if you're constantly stuck in lockdown, if you are constantly thinking about what you need to do, if you're constantly thinking about what needs to change and how you can be positive, and you have to always think when is lockdown going to end, then that's actually making us think a lot and not really help us stay positive. So obviously we got over the first lockdown because we knew that occasionally, or rather sometime soon, that the lockdown restrictions would be eased. We knew that we would finally be able to go back to normal life, and that's how we got over the first lockdown. But that's not the same with the second lockdown, because we're not too sure when it will end. Although it got extended by a month, we don't necessarily have any guarantee that the lockdown will be extended, or rather that the lockdown will be lifted in exactly a month, right? So there is a lot of doubts, there is a lot of uncertainty out there. But the best thing to do is actually find ways to stay productive, find ways to spend your time, find ways in which you can connect with your friends and your family. Especially if you're spending a lot of time with your family right now, one thing you can definitely do is just hang out with them. You can You can hang out with them, you can do family activities. And what I mean when I say family activities is simple things like playing card games, cooking dinner together, things like that actually really help. And because we've been so busy before the pandemic, we haven't been actually able to spend a lot of time with our families, and now we're finally getting the chance. So if you want to have a family game night, then this is probably another thing you could be doing in the middle of lockdown. So there are ways in which you can stay positive, there are ways in which you can help yourself. So make sure you use those and you constantly help yourself, your family, and you make sure everyone is okay, because at the end of the day, we all want to get out of this pandemic safe. We all want to make sure we're healthy. We want to make sure that we will be okay someday. And don't worry, because we will be okay. We just need to give it some time. We just need to tell ourselves we will be okay. We just need to tell ourselves that we can get through this, and we can finally get through this, okay? So don't worry, you'll be fine. And it's time to actually end this, because I have some more things to tell you about, okay? So make sure you stay tuned for that, and I'll be back in a few more minutes, but stay tuned, because next we'll be talking about the anti-vax conspiracy. And I know that sounds really interesting, because I'm super excited to talk to you about that as well. So make sure you're tuned for the anti-vax conspiracy, because I have so many things to share with you. So until then, I will catch you soon.